Hey everybody, it's me, John Anthony Chihak Soltero. I am the anti-hero, and I'm here today again, finally, because I filmed Something is Killing the Children before this, but I think I'm going to refilm that because it went way off the deep end. And here today with Grade That Comic, once again. First episode back, technically. The Last Ronin, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If you've never seen Grade That Comic before, basically what I do is I just sit here and I tell you a little bit about the book, you know, kind of the art style, the story a little bit. I do my best not to go into spoilers with this, but at the same time, I grade it on a 10.0 scale, like a slabbed comic book. And by doing so, breaking down art, story, how it resonated with me emotionally, you know, maybe how the book was received, hype, things like that, all play into the final grade for the product. Now, issue 1 of The Last Ronin came out in October, the end of October 2020. Okay. Issue 5 came out 2 weeks ago. Okay, not even a full 2 weeks ago. I believe it was, 2 weeks ago. So, April 2022. 5-issue miniseries. Comparisons to things like Doomsday Clock, taking 2 years for 12 issues. That's still technically a bi-monthly series, if you want to give it that or deny it. One of the issues that I seriously have with The Last Ronin is not only did the first issue come out in October of 2020, but it was solicited for a May 2020 release in either January, it was solicited in either January or February of 2020 in Diamond Previews. Put it on my pull list with my then local comic shop, Charlie's Comic Books. Well, coming up on that time frame, that book was nowhere to be seen. But what happened between solicitation and the would-be release date? COVID, of course. So what happened in that time? A global pandemic. Things changed throughout the world, throughout the comic book industry. There were a stop pencils or pencils down movement because they didn't want people potentially getting sick or overworking themselves. Some of it may have to do with publishers needing to stop publication because they couldn't afford it, because people weren't going to be buying books if people weren't going to be going into shops and things like that. This was also the transition period when DC made a stand and left Diamond Distributors, the monopoly of comic book distribution for the past, 25, 30 years, right? Not a week went by at that local comic shop, Charlie's Comic Books, where I wouldn't hear at least one thing that had happened with Diamond. They shorted him books. Books were delivered and damaged because they were not packed properly. He was shipped stuff he didn't order. He was shipped an extra box of stuff that he had to pay for shipping that was just promotional material that he couldn't use anyways. He had, by the time Charlie's brick and mortar closed a year later in early 2021, he had 2 small diamond boxes, so 1 full diamond box, full of books that Diamond sent him that he never ordered, including some 1-in-10 ratios, like multiple 1-in-10 ratios of the same book. So he would have had to have ordered, 60 to 80 copies of this one book in order to receive this many. Just really, really bizarre stuff. So 2020, the first half of 2020 was historical for many, many reasons. A lot of them not good, of course. But there was hope, right? Because we were going to see one of the first original Ninja Turtles stories ever. We were going to see Eastman and Laird back together. Well, not really, because this was supposedly a story they came up with years ago, right? So it's not really them coming back together and collaborating on a new story. This is a story that was conceived of years ago and then finalized and, you know, put together. But here's the issue. This was supposed to launch or supposed to drop in May or June of 2020. It didn't see the light of day until October, the end of October 2020. Now, what happened? Well, first of all, the book is a different size. Um, but would that have played into um, not being able to be produced in a even reasonably timely manner? No. And you want to know how I know? People also talked about paper shortages and that this was just a supply chain issue. That's not really true either. And you know how I know? In the time between the solicitation of issue number one and the release of issue number one, I redrew an entire comic book, 32 pages, turned it into 40 pages, colored it, lettered it, had it edited, submitted it to a publisher, and had it turned in a month before this even came out, and I had to start over from scratch. The only help I got with that was I had an editor, and somebody inked about a quarter of the book for me, Bill Simpson, who ended up doing colors in issues 4 and 5. But still, if an independent creator can create a brand new book, like has to redraw everything, and can do it in less time, and doesn't have the pull and the resources of an IDW, then what's really going on? That's something that we've never gotten answered by IDW. And had I not been as invested in this book and had it not had some pull to me, I probably would have dropped it after a while. I gotta say, issue number one was awesome. It ended the way I was hoping it was going to end because I knew Michelangelo could and should be the last of them. And somebody may ask me why. He was the goofy little brother who didn't really fit and all these other things, and he just goofed off and stuff. A lot of people use humor as a way to deal with stress and anger and to deflect things and to use it as a shield so they don't have to deal with, you know, the harsh realities of life. I'm one of those people, except my humor is a lot more sarcastic, but it's also, as I'm learning in therapy, a coping mechanism. And it's a good coping mechanism at times because a lot of the humor I used is meant to relieve tension, and it's meant to distract people from like really harsh things that are going on. So I can relate a lot to Michelangelo in that regard. And like Michelangelo, I'm a survivor. Like nothing has beat me yet. It may have slowed me down, it may have kicked me in the teeth and knocked me out, but it didn't put me out of the game, right? So issue number one was an amazing reveal that it was Michelangelo, but he's kind of having delusions, if you will. Not sure if these are grief-based delusions or guilt-based survivor's guilt. But he's seeing his brothers and he's talking to them, having full-on conversations like they're there. And he gets found, you know, almost dead by April, who, you know, brings him back to the sewers, and, you know, he wakes up and she's nursing him back to health. And she's got a kid. And it's hers and Casey's kid, and the kid is a teenager by now, so that's how long it's been. And the other aspect of it is that April has lost an arm and a leg during the whole battle with Shredder and his Foot Clan and Karai. And for that reason, it was really good. I enjoyed it. I wanted it to be Michelangelo more than anything, because in the original Ninja Turtles movie in the 90s, the one standing on top of the barn who screams Splinter, they overdubbed Raphael's voice, but you can very clearly see that it's an orange bandana. So it's Michelangelo who's freaking out and beating up the punching bag in the old barn. So Michelangelo's a survivor. He's kick-ass, you know, all these things. And it started out very, very strong. I was so stoked. Waiting for one of my best friends, Ned, to finish issue number 1 so that we could talk about it because I didn't want to spoil anything for her. And so a couple days after she got it, she finally read it, and we, talked about it and like what we liked, what we didn't like. And then it was like February or March of 2021 before we saw issue 2, and it was very weird because of all the weird reordering that they said they had to do because they took all the base orders set for May 2020, right? And then those books didn't come out for whatever reason. Don't know if they had to, go back and destroy that printing or redo it. I've heard stories where they had to hire a new artist to redo issue number 1, which doesn't really make sense because an artist can typically, especially when a bunch of the flashback sequences in here are drawn by Eastman, it's not like each issue was fully drawn by one artist. And I'm not sure the purpose behind necessarily changing an artist on the fly if that's actually what happened, because there's been no confirmations about that specifically. But months and months and months go by before you get issue number 2. And issue number 2 is pretty good. With the subsequent issues, you start to delve into the actual war itself, how the turtles were killed, how Casey was killed, why Michelangelo left, how Shredder, how Splinter were killed. Because this is kind of told outside of the current IDW continuity. It keeps some of it, but some of it's gone. You still keep Karai there, but she's a villain. And then her son is actually the one who's keeping the Orokusaki name alive. The Foot Clan he's keeping together. And we keep seeing these books that are very strangely sized, don't fit in a standard bag and board because they're about an inch taller than your average book. But here's the thing, that's not a printing issue, that's a trimming and a binding issue. That's part of the printing process. So as long as your paper is taller than this, there's not really an issue with that process. So that shouldn't delay anything. But you keep moving further and further along the story, and it's concentrating more on Michelangelo's flashback and this journal that he kept that marked his training and how he got to the place that he is now. And we're well into 2021 at this point. More than halfway through 2021. You keep seeing these, I don't know, it's just really strange and really weird, and you get like a ton of variants for each book. There was probably I think they said 99 variants for issue number 1 alone. They've reprinted it 4 times and a director's cut, so it's had 5 printings now. And then 2 weeks ago, in April, mid-April of 2022, you get the final issue that ends in the most cliche way you could possibly end a comic book. In this epic story, you end it extremely cliche. But at the same time, if spoilers, you probably want to skip ahead a few minutes. If Michelangelo didn't die and he remained with April and Casey, then that would also be cliche. Guy walking off into the hero walking off with his family. Again, if you did the other side of things where Casey or April die and Michelangelo lives, then that's just more guilt that he has to live with. But that's a hero's journey. Cliche as it is, it's still a hero's journey. And then the whole way that they went, where apparently the exposure to the mutagen for all those years mutated both Casey Jones and April O'Neil, so that their bodies mutated slightly so that when they had Casey, she was more of a mutant than they were. and somehow keeps this weird circle going where the very, very end is Casey training and getting stronger and everything and saying they're part of my family. And then it comes full circle because you see them getting ready to test new mutagen from blood samples on 4 turtles. This book didn't live up to the hype at all. Issue number 1, yes, very much so. Started out super strong, 0 to 60 in like 3.5 seconds or whatever, Started out extremely strong, very powerful, gave you a swerve because I don't think really anybody thought Michelangelo would be the one to be the survivor. But in the end, they kind of make a joke out of it because he ran away and that's how he survived. He was still a coward, and his brothers were mocking him from beyond the grave, suggesting that he was never strong enough to do this, and that any one of them was more capable than he was. Which in a way I could kind of empathize with, because when I was getting ready to graduate from college, I was on the verge of flunking out. I was in my last semester. I was supposed to work on my portfolio, and I was supposed to work on my demo reel and all these things. And my nana had just died, and it became this thought process of like, well, what does it really matter? We're all going to die anyways. And, it's not really that important. And I didn't have that motivation to finish out strong. And I remember sitting at a coffee house, then safe house, one night with my little light table, and I'm tracing away all the keyframes and everything for my animation. And I suddenly start to hear all the voices of everybody who doubted me. Now, they were nobody specific, but they were representative of this idea that we knew you couldn't accomplish this. We knew you were going to fail. Look at all this time and effort you put in, and you didn't come out on top. Like, you didn't even get by. You don't have a degree. You're going to be in debt. And you know what? That got me mad. It got me so mad that it actually got me pissed. It got me motivated to bust out and finish my demo reel. And I may have only graduated by the skin of my teeth, but I graduated and I have a diploma because I got mad, because I came up with this idea that people thought I would fail and actually wanted to see me fail. And I don't think that was true in any stretch of reality. So in essence, there are parts of this story that I can relate to from Michelangelo's perspective. But this book, again, the delays almost 2 years. 2 years from when it was solicited and almost 2 years from when it was supposed to drop, give or take a few weeks, is when it finally finishes, and it's only 5 issues. The artwork was good. It wasn't spectacular. Some of the action, especially in the later issues 4 and 5, feels like it was kind of rushed. So a lot of the fight strikes and poses seemed a little static. They didn't seem to flow. Now, when you're drawing, a overtly muscled character, anthropomorphic turtle in a carapace, it's not like he can bend. He doesn't have that swivel joint kind of thing that he can do, right? So, yeah, some of it's going to be kind of static. Some of it's going to be kind of stiff in terms of the fight poses and stuff. But at the same time, it definitely broke down for me, and it came across, I don't want to say lazy, but it definitely came across more independent than anything that should be put out to this magnitude that's being promoted to this extent. You see a lot of, more indie books, maybe by somebody who's a little more inexperienced in terms of producing art, or maybe producing fight scenes of that scope with that many adversaries or that many characters or that style of fighting, and they may be unfamiliar with it, couldn't get very good references, and just aren't overall comfortable with it. And so their art comes off stiff, the anatomy doesn't look right, maybe they're pulling their punches literally by not focusing on the aspects of like the strike actually following through versus, you know, the strike like coming in that way. And so there's that weird moment of tension or right at the moment of impact. So you see this when you should see that. And it should have this, it should resonate with you to be like, bam, he got hit. And it should look good. And don't get me wrong, it looked good, but it didn't look good enough. So if I were going to make a wrestling comparison, this is Goldberg circa 2016 when he speared Brock Lesnar out of his boots like, what, 6 times in 2 minutes and then beat him at that SummerSlam match versus, you know, Goldberg DDP at Halloween Havoc 1998. When DDP made him look like $1 million. And like Goldberg still looked like a monster, a killer monster, but it didn't come off the same. It came off as almost a cheaper imitation. And I'll probably get some hate for that because, you know, the Ninja Turtles are beloved and they have a cult following and they're the single most successful independent comic book property of all time. I have a lot of respect for Kevin Eastman. I've met him a few times. He's a really, really nice guy. His wife's really nice. They've contributed things to art auctions to help raise money for different charities. Most notably when we did St. Jude's in 2019 and he was at a convention I attended and I asked if they would be willing to contribute like a single signed comic, and he contributed 6 pieces, like 3 books and 3 11x17 prints, most of which were like either reprint ads for the early issues of the Ninja Turtles or like I believe one was the micro series, the Raphael micro series with Casey Jones in it. So those I will never, you know, look down upon the creator from that. This is just something that doesn't resonate with me as a fan, as somebody who grew up not on the Turtles comic books, honestly, on the Turtle video games, the arcade games, and the Turtle movies and the Turtle cartoon in the late 80s. I'm not an original Mirage Ninja Turtles fan. I've reread those books, and I honestly don't feel they hold up very well. They are very, very independent, and they're kind of that like edgelord type scenario that I really kind of went with Euthanasia. So there's a lot that sticks with me in that. But I don't fault anybody for that. And had I not already been on issue 4 of this, like I would have, you know, if it was still issue 1, I would have been like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna bother picking up the rest of this. It was good. It was just not good enough to wait 2 years for 5 issues to come out. So the overall grade that I give Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin out of 10 is a 7.0. Now, 7.0 is not a horrible grade. It's not a great grade. It's fine plus, I believe. Yeah, fine plus. It's not a terrible grade. You've got a classic Silver Age book, classic Bronze Age book. Like if you've got an ASM 129 or an Incredible Hulk 181 and it's a 7.0, you're looking at thousands upon thousands of dollars for that book. So a 7.0 ain't bad. And I feel like I'm being a little bit generous because when it takes you that long to put out something and you're working through a major publisher like this, that's a huge kick in the teeth to your fans. And there's no real excuse for that from a major publisher on a major book like this. It's not even like it's a secondary title. Like after Ninja Turtles, the main series, this is the book that people were getting from IDW. Until recently, all IDW was doing was licensed properties. They are not, they just announced that they are going to start doing some new to them, exclusive to them properties that are not licensed. So this is the first time IDW is going to be doing anything outside of that realm. So like 2.5 times the length of my normal, try to keep it under 10 minutes grade that comic. You get a 7.0 for your effort. But that seems fitting that I had to talk about this for 2.5 times as long, seeing as how it took 2.5 times as long for this series to come out. But I'm John Anthony Chihawk Soltero. Read independent comic books, support local comic shops. Free Comic Book Day is this weekend. Remember, if you're going to an LCS to pick up your free comics, buy something, contribute with the community. Those comics are not free for the local comic shop. Believe me. I know, I've worked with Charlie's Comic Books in the past on a lot of this stuff, done events. This is one of the first few years that I'm not doing Free Comic Book Day, and it kills me. 2020 we didn't do it, 2021 we didn't do it. Third year in a row I'm not doing a Free Comic Book Day. But also check out the Bubble Patrol. That's my independent comic book that took 5 years to produce 5 issues. So say what you will about that, but for the most part, I was a one-man show, producing it, writing it, drawing it myself, coloring it, first 3 issues anyways, editing it, lettering it, hiring an editor to go over my edits to make sure that I didn't miss anything, and there were still things that I missed. And then crowdfunding each of those things myself. I didn't have anybody else help me with that until this last issue. So 5 issues in 5 years is not a bad run when you consider that it's actually well over 100 pages of story. So check out the Bubba Patrol on Facebook. Link is in the description below. Check out my Saturday show called Non-Con, the Online Comic Con, because it's online. Oh, it's online. Pick up some books, chat a little bit, and talk some shop. Till next time, whenever that's going to be, maybe in 2024. Hopefully not. But maybe.